On a rainy night, a 66-year-old woman goes into desperate in a hospital in the United States, shouting that she dug her daughter. The doctors, initially unbelieving, are confronted with an even more distressing story than they could imagine. It was a cold and rainy night in Chicago. Empty street reflected the lights of the hasty cars trying to escape the imminent storm. Inside St. Joseph's Hospital, the routine was quiet for a night shift. Doctors and nurses moved mechanically while patients slept in their beds, oblivious to the rain outside. Suddenly, the emergency door opened with a crash. An elderly woman with white hair and somewhat worn clothes panicked. His eyes were wide with fear, and his body trembled with every step he took. She shouted with a hoarse but painful voice, "I unearthed my daughter. Help her, please. She's there." The nearest nurse, Joel, ran to her, trying to understand what was going on. He didn't expect anything so strange, but the expression of terror on the woman's face was real. "Madam, please calm down. What happened to your daughter?" asked Joel, trying to be kind, but already starting to realize that there was something very wrong. The woman, without responding directly, pointed to the street, as if she wanted someone to look for something she could not explain. His face was marked by suffering, his tears teary eyes. She was completely out of her own, and the medical team began to stir. Dr. Clara Mason, an experienced 40-year-old, quickly arrived at the scene. She looked at the woman and felt a chill in the air. It was as if that desperate scream of a mother was a message of something much deeper and more dark. The lady, still in tears, repeated the same words, now with a more distressed tone. "I got my daughter unearthed. She can't be dead. Help, please, she needs help." The team quickly made the woman settle on the stretcher, but no one knew how to proceed. Such a strange and distressing request could only have a disturbing explanation. After all, how could anyone dig up a body and bring it there? With the support of nurses, the woman was taken to a service room. Dr. Clara, who had seen everything throughout her career, felt an inexplicable tension in the air. She knew this was not a simple psychological crisis. Something was happening, something she couldn't understand yet. "Madam, what happened to her daughter? How did she die?" asked Clara, trying to calm the woman and understand what was behind that scream. The woman looked at her with eyes full of sadness and pain, and slowly began to tell her story. The lady, who presented herself as Evelyn, took a deep breath before speaking. His voice was shaking, but the determination to tell his story was visible. The now more attentive and curious medical team prepared to hear what could be a disconcerting narrative. "My daughter Lily died 7 years ago. She was only 27 years old," Evelyn began, with an expression of pain that seemed to cut everyone's heart in the room. "She was with a boyfriend. Something wasn't right with him. I didn't like him, but Lily told me that everything was fine, until one day she just disappeared." The tone of his voice was heavy, as if the words were only the reflection of a pain that was never completely healed. Dr. Clara leaned a little forward, feeling the need to understand more. Evelyn continued, "Lily didn't come home anymore. I searched for weeks, months, and nothing. After a while, they called me to the police. They said they had found a body, but the body wasn't hers. She disappeared without a trail. I lost hope of seeing her again. The pain of losing a daughter, it's indescribable." The silence in the room was palpable, and everyone was absorbing Evelyn's words. She looked at the doctors and continued, now with a more tense expression. I never accepted her death. I always believed something was wrong. I knew something they didn't tell me. Until recently, after so many years, I started to have dreams. Lily's dreams calling me, and I saw her, deep down a cemetery. She asked me to pick her up, told me I was waiting for me. I dug up the tomb. There was a dramatic break before she finished her story. Evelyn looked at the doctors with an expression contorted with anguish. She was there, but not as I remembered her. She was alive, but not in her body. She was somewhere between the world of the living and the dead. I didn't know what to do, so I brought her with me. The silence that followed was heavy. Dr. Clara, who had already heard strange stories, could not process what she had just heard. But something in the way Evelyn spoke looked real, and a growing fear began to take over everyone in the room. There was something more there, something inexplicable. I brought her here in the car. She still had her eyes closed, but she felt she was listening to me. She was just sleeping, and I needed help. So I came here. Joel, the nurse, didn't know what to think. The gaze he exchanged with Dr. Clara showed the same confusion, but also a hint of curiosity. The woman before them was so desperate that there was no way to disregard her request. The tension in the room was getting unbearable. Evelyn was completely committed to her story, and it seemed that she believed in every word she said. However, something was missing, something no one could identify. "Where is your daughter now, Evelyn?" asked Dr. Clara, her smoother but still full of doubt. "We need to check her condition." Evelyn, with a deep look and an expression of pain, indicated the maca next door, which was covered with a sheet. The woman hesitated before she approached, as if she feared what she might find but knew she needed to see what was going on. With the medical team ready to investigate more, Dr. Clara pulled the sheet with caution. What she saw made her heart fire and her eyes wide in shock. The sheet was pulled with the same caution with which the lid of a box full of secrets is taken. What was under him, however, was something that none of the doctors present could imagine. There, lying on the stretcher, was a young woman, with the appearance of a 27-year-old teenager, just as Evelyn had described her daughter Lily. However, there was something peculiar on his face. Her skin was pale and rigid, and her eyes, though closed, looked in a state of almost drunkenness, as if stuck between two worlds. Dr. Clara, unable to contain the surprise, touched Lily's wrist, feeling a light but fickle beat. It was not possible to say if she was alive or dead. The cold of the room seemed to intensify as everyone in the room watched the scene, not knowing how to react. What does that mean?" muttered Joel, still trying to understand what was going on. His voice was embargoed, but he could not hide the growing fear that spread throughout his body. Evelyn, seeing the astonished expression of doctors, took a step ahead, as if about to explode in explanations. She looked at them with eyes full of a mixture of despair and devotion. She's here. I found her. She's somewhere between life and death. But I know she heard me, I felt. She's stuck. For some reason I don't understand. But I brought her back, and now I need help." Dr. Clara, keeping calm, signaled to nurses to prepare to transfer Lily to the ICU. The situation was beyond any conventional medical explanation, and this was beginning to affect even the rationality of the professionals present. However, before anything could be done, Evelyn raised his voice again, firmer and more determined. "No, don't take her away. You don't understand. She has asked me to bring her back, and now that she brought her, you can't leave her alone. You don't know what that means." The still astonished doctors were divided between the impulse to do what the situation required and the fear that Evelyn was completely out of his way. The situation was becoming a mixture of urgency and mystery. What was going on with Lily? Was she really alive? Or would it be the body of a young woman without soul, brought back by a miracle, or a nightmare? "Madam, we need to perform tests to understand what is happening. Your daughter needs immediate care. We can't just," Dr. Clara started to say, but she was interrupted. Evelyn looked at Clara with an intensity in the eyes that made the doctor hesitate. She was not just asking for help. She was begging for something much deeper, something that transcended the boundaries of medicine and reason. "She can't be touched by anyone else. Only I can help her. I'm the only one who can completely bring her back, you don't understand. She's here because it's me who calls her." Evelyn's determination no longer seemed irrational but an unshakable belief. As a mother who knows that something unnameable is happening to her son, she spoke with the confidence of those who have had an indescribable suffering, and now, finally, she felt that she was close to recovering what she lost. Dr. Clara felt a wave of compassion. She looked at Evelyn, the young woman lying on the bed, and to the surrounding nurses, all without knowing what to do. It was as if an invisible force was intertwined in that room, shaping every decision they made. "Evelyn, we're going to do everything we can, but we need to understand what happened. If you really brought it back, we need to understand why she is in this state and what we can do to help her recover." Evelyn, with tears in her eyes, finally gave a deep sigh and after a moment of hesitation said, "I know it doesn't seem possible, but something happened to me. I know she calls me, as if something was still in her soul, something that needs to be completed. She can't rest without me understanding what happened to her, without me knowing who made her disappear." The room was tense. The sense of urgency increased, but at the same time there was something indefinable that was about to be revealed. What Evelyn was trying to communicate? How to explain the inexplicable? That's when something unusual happened. Lily, lying on the stretcher, moved her lips slightly as if he tried to speak, but without emitting any sound. The medical team approached quickly, the fixed eyes on it. The young woman was still pale, but there was something there, something that made them question everything they knew about death and life. Evelyn, seeing her daughter's movement, began to whisper something softly, words that seemed to be a silent prayer. She looked in a trance, but was also in tune with something deep. "I brought you back. Please talk to me. I know you're here." It was then that the surprise happened. Lily, with an almost inaudible voice, said, "Mom, I'm so tired." The room was completely silent. The voice of Lily, fragile and tired, reverberated in the environment, causing everyone present to be paralyzed. Evelyn, his eyes full of tears, approached his stretcher and gently held his daughter's hand, as if he had found the only thing left in the world. His voice, now embargoed, was the only thing that broke the silence. I knew you were there, daughter. I knew you were still here, waiting for me." The doctors stood away, observing the scene with a mixture of compassion and apprehension. Dr. Clara, though deeply touched, couldn't help wondering what was happening. How was it possible that a young woman who should be dead for years was back, even in such a strange and indefinite state? What Evelyn had done to bring her back? And more importantly, how could she know what really happened to Lily? Evelyn didn't seem willing to talk about what she had done to dig up her daughter. She focused only on reconnecting with Lily, as if it were the only thing that really mattered at that moment. Evelyn's deep and anxious look made it clear to feel increasing pressure, as if time was running out and every second was crucial to understanding the complexity of this situation. "I just want you to be well, my daughter. Tell me what happened." "What happened to you?" Evelyn asked, his voice full of pain. Lily, still with her eyes closed, made a visible effort to speak again. This time his voice was a little clearer, but still seemed a whisper from another world. I was taken." Lily's words came out like a muffled moan. She seemed to fight something, as if trying to break free from a nightmare that kept her prisoner. I managed. Flee." Evelyn cringed, the tears dripping down her face. She squeezed Lily's hand harder, as if she could anchor her back to life with the touch of her fingers. Dr. Clara watched everything, with thoughts running in her mind. She knew there was something much deeper and darker behind Lily's situation, something that Evelyn, however desperate and loving it was, still did not fully understand. Why was Lily alive, and why had it been brought back that way? That's when Clara decided to act. She slowly approached Evelyn with a firm look, trying to keep calm at the woman's emotional chaos. "Evelyn, we need to know more. We need to understand what happened so that we can help Lily." "What do you mean by taken? Who took her? Where was she?" Evelyn looked at the doctor as if the weight of her words had hit her. She seemed to hesitate, and the tension in the room increased every second. Finally, with a trembling voice, Evelyn replied, I don't know exactly who did it, but I found traces. Traces in a distant place where she used to go with him." The room suddenly became even silent. The he to which Evelyn referred was the boyfriend of Lily, a man named Thomas, whom she suspected from the beginning, but that no one ever considered suspicious. Their relationship had always been hazy, marked by unresolved discussions and secrets. Evelyn never trusted Thomas, but never imagined that he could have something to do with his daughter's disappearance. "Are you saying that Thomas is involved in any way?" Dr. Clara asked, now with a serious expression. She felt she was beginning to see a piece of the puzzle fit, but she couldn't understand the whole context yet. "I don't know. I found marks on Lily's body after I found her in the cemetery. He was involved in some way." "I know that." Evelyn, now with a tense countenance, didn't seem so confused anymore. She knew there was something wrong, something she needed to understand, but the pain of her daughter's loss and the confusion with recent events seemed to overshadow her perception. The tension in the air was palpable. Evelyn was trying to gather the pieces of a truth that seemed to escape between her fingers, while Lily, still trapped between life and death, whispered meaningless words, trying to communicate with her mother. "Mom, I can't go yet." Lily started murmuring, but her eyes opened slowly, and everyone in the room arrested their breath. She seemed to have one last message, something important to reveal. But before she could say more, her body circled, as if a huge pain crossed her. Evelyn despaired, trying to hold her daughter, but the sudden movement caused the young woman to fall back on the bed, her eyes closing again. She was in a state of agony, but the battle was far from over. "She's coming back. She's coming back!" Evelyn shouted, not knowing what to do, completely taken by the situation. Dr. Clara, with her eyes fixed in the situation, already knew what she had to do. It was time to confront Thomas's secret, to find out what was really happening and how it affected Lily's life, Evelyn's life, and all around her. The room was tense, as if the air was loaded with an invisible energy that pulsed among those present. Evelyn, with a face containing face of anguish, held Lily's hand tightly, silently begging her daughter to recover. Doctors, although well-trained to deal with emergency situations, could not avoid growing discomfort in the face of what was happening. The situation transcended the limits of medicine, and everyone was involved in a deeper mystery than they could imagine. Lily, now still, seemed to be stuck between two worlds. His heartbeat was still irregular, and his breathing, though weak, did not fail to indicate that there was something more there, something that challenged any rational explanation. However, what no one knew, and what Evelyn had not completely revealed, was that there was something much darker behind what was happening, something she feared but didn't know how to face. That's when a nurse hurried into the living room with a piece of paper in his hands. She looked at the doctors and, with a serious expression, handed Dr. Clara. "Doctor, we found something. One of the outdoor security guards saw a car parked in front of the cemetery. They found something in the back seat. It wasn't just an ordinary car." The nurse hesitated and, Clear, immediately alarmed, took the paper. When she read, her heart shot. What was written there was a crucial indication that what Evelyn was saying had a much darker foundation than anyone could imagine. In the back seat of Thomas's car, traces of fresh land had been found, as if the vehicle had been used to transport something or someone who should not be there. "What you are saying is that," Clara began, but could not finish the sentence, because doctors and nurses were in shock with the implication of the discovery. Evelyn, who had heard the conversation, was pale. She looked at Dr. Clara, her eyes loaded with pain, and then, with a low and fearful voice, he said, I knew he was behind all this. It wasn't just the dating. It wasn't just jealous. He killed her. He did something terrible, and I couldn't do anything to stop it." Evelyn's words fell like a bomb in the room. Dr. Clara approached her, her eyes fixed on her face, trying to understand what exactly was being revealed. "Are you saying that Thomas killed Lily?" Clara asked, her voice tense. Evelyn gave a deep sigh, as if the weight of years of mourning was finally exploding inside her. I found the letter. His letter. I found a letter in Lily's room after his disappearance. It was a farewell letter, but he didn't want her to leave. He arrested her. And then, after killing her, he tried to hide everything. I found the letter and the marks on Lily's body, but she wasn't dead. I need you to help me bring it back." The confusion took over the room as everyone soothed the revelations. Evelyn's story was now unfolding in a more complex way, and the puzzle pieces were finally starting to fit in. "But what did he do to her?" asked Joel, the nurse, his eyes fixed on the young woman lying on the stretcher. "How do you say she's alive? That's impossible." Evelyn looked at him as if he tried to translate the suffering he had kept for so long. She knew her words sounded unreal, but for her that made perfect sense. What she had done to bring Lily back was the only possible gesture for a desperate mother. She was not dead. She was being kept in a state between life and death, as if a part of her soul had been torn, and the body, though she was there, was not whole. He arrested her, Joel. He did something terrible to make sure she wasn't leaving, and now she's back. But not totally. I need to help what he did. Dr. Clara could no longer ignore the severity of the situation. Evelyn was saying that her daughter was in some kind of intermediate state, between the living and the dead. What did that mean? How could a human body survive such an experience? And more importantly, how could they help her? It was then that Lily, still in her debilitated condition, gave a little breath, making everyone in the room turning to her. His eyes were starting to open again, but this time there was something different. There was a clarity in them that did not exist before. I can't stay here. No. He took me, Lily whispered, the strongest voice now but still full of pain. Evelyn, with tears in her eyes, held her daughter's hand once again, but this time it wasn't just the desperation that motivated her. There was something more, a deep certainty that her daughter somehow was still alive and that she needed help. "You'll be fine, my daughter. I'm here." I'll save you no matter what happens. Doctor. Clara felt a wave of empathy for Evelyn, but also the weight of immense responsibility. What Evelyn said was beyond any medical diagnosis, and yet there was something arguably real in the situation. She knew something needed to be done, but what? What was happening to Lily? How could they take it out of this state? While Clara reflected, Evelyn, her face marked by pain, looked at her daughter and, with an almost imperceptible voice, said, "I know who did it, and he will pay." The silence that followed those words of Evelyn was overwhelming. The room seemed to be suspended in time, with all fixed eyes on Lily, who, although still fragile and without strength, was beginning to recover consciousness. The tension increased every second that passed, and Evelyn, with his eyes fixed on his daughter, seemed to have reached deep clarity, as if he were finally beginning to accept that what had happened was not just a nightmare. It was real, and the worst was yet to come. Doctor. Clara, observing the situation, knew she needed to make a quick decision. What Evelyn said about Lily's condition, what she had revealed about Thomas, she couldn't be ignored. If all Evelyn said were true, that wasn't just a medical case. It was a case of crime, and a terrible crime. But at the same time, what was happening to Lily challenged all laws of biology and medicine. Evelyn, we need to take Lily to the ICU immediately. She's not well, and we need more tests. What you're saying about Thomas, it can't be ignored. If he really did what you were saying, we have to act fast, Clara said, trying to keep calm, but already knowing that the implications of the situation were huge. Evelyn seemed to be in a trance, but also determined. She knew that while Lily was there, in some state between life and death, all she wanted was to protect her. The outside world, the hospital, the laws and the police, all this seemed distant. Evelyn's only focus was her daughter, and she didn't know how far she was willing to keep her safe. I know she needs medical help, but you don't understand. She's not just sick, she's being manipulated somehow. He has taken her. Thomas. He has something to do with it, and he will pay. I can't let him escape, Evelyn said with a firm voice, but the fear still evident in his eyes. Clara took a deep breath, the weight of the situation starting to settle in her chest. She knew she should call the police immediately, but something prevented her from taking this attitude. Something in Evelyn made her hesitate, as if the woman's words were loaded with despair that could not be ignored. Maybe it was the way Evelyn talked about her daughter, as if she really believed something else was happening, something none of the doctors could understand. Evelyn, I understand that you are scared, and that you want to protect your daughter, but that's very serious. If Thomas is involved, we need him to be arrested. We need proof. Clara was calmly tried to make Evelyn understand that the legal system should follow her course. Evelyn looked at the doctor with a look of pain, as if Clara was asking for something impossible. She looked at Lily, who was more conscious now, though still pale and visibly weakened. Evelyn knew Lily was trying to communicate, but her body didn't respond the same way. She was lost between the worlds, and Evelyn felt that while bringing her daughter back to life, she was also losing the battle to protect her from an even more cruel reality. I know you don't believe it, but you have to understand, Dr. Clara. He has done something with her. Something we can't explain, but he won't escape. He will pay for everything he has done. The doctor was silent for a few seconds before making a difficult decision. She knew what Evelyn was asking was extreme, but there was a part of her that, without explanation, felt that there was something else, something that transcended any scientific explanation. Clara looked at Lily, who seemed slowly recovering, and felt that she could not simply follow the traditional protocols. Something was very wrong, but something was also starting to unfold before his eyes. I'm going to call the police, but we need to make sure Lily is stable. We can't let her suffer anymore, Clara said, already taking the phone and getting ready to make the call. As she dials, Evelyn watched her with an expression that mixed hope and fear. She can't be taken again. I can't let it. I can't lose her again, Evelyn muttered, her voice broken, but full of an almost unqualified determination. While the police were called, the situation inside the hospital became increasingly unsustainable. What was happening to Lily did not look like anything that science could explain, and the growing fear that Thomas was behind something even darker hovered over all present. The truth about what had happened to Lily, and how alive she was, but not entirely. She became increasingly clear but still unattainable. Evelyn, with his eyes fixed on his daughter, knew that the fight was not just against time or against the disease, It was a fight against a much deeper mystery. She didn't know exactly what Thomas had done to her daughter, but she was determined to discover and do justice, costing what she cost. The pressure on everyone in the hospital increased every minute that passed. The feeling of being in an unrecognizable scenario, where the limits of science and logic seemed to dissolve, consumed everyone. Police had not yet arrived, and Evelyn's anxiety only grew because the feeling that her daughter was still in danger would not leave her alone. Lily, while now more warning, was in a precarious physical state, and her mind still seemed to be divided between the physical world and what she felt was the other side. The confusion was evident in his eyes, but Evelyn knew something else was happening to his daughter, something that was not just physical. The atmosphere inside the emergency room was heavy, but a silent transformation was happening in Evelyn. She, a woman marked by years of mourning and hopelessness, was becoming stronger with every moment she passed with Lily. Something inside her, that unconditional love of mother, was awakening in a way she didn't know it existed. She could no longer be the same. She knew that to save her daughter, she would need to face the truth, regardless of how much that scared her. Evelyn was being forced to look at something greater than her personal pain, something that challenged the logic and understanding of any human being. His struggle was not just against time, against death or disease. It was a spiritual and emotional battle. Dr. Clara, who was observing Evelyn's process of transformation, felt that her wife before her was beginning to break free from pain. Of course, the pain was still there, visible in each movement, but there was a growing resilience in his eyes. Evelyn was no longer desperate to save her daughter. She was becoming a warrior, willing to fight any force that tried to separate them. You know, Evelyn, one of the greatest strengths a human being can have is love. But sometimes, this can also be the greatest vulnerability, Clara said with a softer tone as she looked at Evelyn and then to Lily. Evelyn, with a fixed look at her daughter, answered with a serenity she didn't know she had. I know. What I did to bring Lily back, it was more than love. It was a necessity, a need that consumed me until I found her again. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I couldn't live without her. Clara was silent. She understood what Evelyn was saying, but she also knew the woman was starting to face a new reality. A reality where she would need to confront not only the past but also the future of her daughter, and the mystery behind everything that had happened. Dr. Clara did not know how that would end, but I could feel that something was about to change. Evelyn, now with a renewed force, got up from the chair where she was sitting next to Lily. She gave a soft kiss on her daughter's forehead, whose eyes were now open, but still with an expression of confusion. Lily looked at her, her tired eyes as if finally recognized her mother's presence, as if connecting with her in a way that once seemed impossible. Mom, you brought me back, but how? Lily asked her lighter, but still tired voice. Evelyn, with a soft smile, took her daughter's hand and held her firmly. I don't know how, daughter, but I know that nothing, neither death nor anything, can separate us, and I will be here. Lily seemed to see for the first time how much she had lost, but also how much she had won. She felt her mother's love, such a powerful love that she almost seemed transcendental. There was something in Evelyn that now seemed stronger than any suffering or loss she could have experienced. Meanwhile, Clara watched with a mixture of admiration and uncertainty. She knew Lily was coming back, but the answers about what happened between her and Thomas were still incomplete. Evelyn's words about Lily's boyfriend, the cemetery, and the hidden truth continued to turn in the air. But for some inexplicable reason, she knew it was not time to question. Lily's healing moment was not just in medicine. It was not just on machines or medicines. The cure was being built by the force of the bond between mother and daughter, by a connection that could not be explained by any of the scientific knowledge that Clara had. The miracle was not in understanding what had happened, but in believing that the impossible could be possible. The power of love was, in fact, transcending the barriers of what was considered viable. Let's go through this, Lily. I know you will recover, but now we need to understand what happened. We can't get in the dark, Evelyn said with a renewed firmness, knowing that he could no longer live without knowing the truth. She was ready to face what she came. Lily, with a slight smile, nodded. I can't remember everything, Mother, but I know what happened was not normal. It wasn't just an illness, not an accident. I was being controlled, but you brought me back. And now I will fight to understand. It was the moment when mother and daughter were finally in a stronger place than any pain they could have felt. Together they began to move to a new chapter of their lives, a chapter where, although still hindered the mystery and fear of what happened to Lily, there was also the certainty that love was the key to everything. The way would not be easy, but Evelyn knew that with her daughter by her side, anything was possible. The next morning arrived with a cloudy and heavy sky, as if the world was watching the unfolding of what was about to happen. The hospital was more agitated than ever, with nurses running around, doctors discussing the next steps, and the police finally coming to investigate the situation involving Thomas and Lily's mysterious condition. Evelyn, now more resolute, knew that the way ahead would be painful, but was also determined to face the ghosts of the past. She no longer feared the truth. She would look for her, cost her what she cost. Lily was still weakened, but her physical condition had improved. The doctors could not explain what had happened, and Lily's condition continued to challenge any traditional diagnosis. She was somehow between life and death. His recovery seemed almost miraculous, but the connection of mother and daughter, the strength of Evelyn's love, seemed to have caused this transformation. Lily knew there was something much deeper happening, and she was willing to unravel this mystery. Meanwhile, the police were trying to gather the pieces. What Evelyn had said about Thomas, Lily's boyfriend, and what was found in her car's rear seat looked more than a simple disappearance. The evidence that he had been in a cemetery, besides other traces of something obscure, made it clear that Lily's case was not just an accident, but a plot of manipulation and control. The case detective, David Roberts, approached Evelyn and Lily, determined to understand the whole story. He was aware that the situation was more delicate than any other case he had already investigated. Evelyn was being extremely careful with his words, but he knew that, to understand what really happened, he would need to go beyond superficial explanations. Evelyn, I understand that the situation is difficult for you, but we need the complete truth. Lily, can you tell us what happened? What exactly Thomas did to you? The detective asked with a serious but unhurried tone, recognizing the evident trauma in his mother and daughter. Lily looked at her mother, and Evelyn, with a tense look, indicated that she was ready to hear. The young woman, still weak, took a deep breath and started talking. The words came out slowly, but the truth was beginning to be revealed. I don't remember everything, but I know something was happening to Thomas. He changed. At first he was just jealous, possessive, but then he started to control me, to get away from everything and everyone. He said no one could understand me, that I couldn't trust anyone. Lily stopped for a moment, closing her eyes as if trying to gather strength to continue. Evelyn, beside him, held his hand firmly, giving him the necessary support. I tried to run away. I tried to get out of that place, but he caught me. He took me to a distant place, a cemetery. I don't know how, but he managed to keep me there, as if I were out of myself, as if he had some control over my body and my mind. The room was silent. Detective Roberts, absorbing each word, felt a chill through his spine. He had his suspicions about Thomas, but hearing that from Lily was an alarming confirmation that the man was more involved than anyone imagined. Lily, you're no longer under his control. You're here now, but you're not alone. Let's do whatever it takes to make sure it never happens to you. Detective Roberts spoke with a softer tone, trying to relieve tension in the air. Lily, with teary eyes, looked at her mother and smiled, even weakly. She knew that now she had a chance to rebuild her life. Evelyn, in turn, knew that although the worst was left behind, the way ahead would not be easy. They needed to face Thomas and unmask him completely. The atmosphere was loaded with a growing sense of urgency. The truth was already partially revealed, but the biggest challenge was yet to come. The detective knew that while Thomas continued in freedom, Lily and Evelyn would not be truly safe. The mystery that involved them still needed to be completely unveiled, and there was one last obstacle to be faced: Thomas's complete revelation and the consequences of his actions. With the support of Clara, detective, and other professionals around, Evelyn was finally beginning to understand the size of the fight that was about to wage. It was not just about saving your daughter. It was a battle against the forces of evil that had infiltrated their lives. A battle against a man who for a long time controlled Lily's life and tried to destroy their hope. Now, with the truth starting to emerge, Evelyn was ready to face what he came. And when she looked at Lily, she felt an unshakable feeling of strength. His daughter was coming back to life, and nothing, not even Thomas, could prevent this from happening. The air was heavy, and the hospital room seemed tighter than ever. Evelyn and Lily had finally begun to understand the magnitude of what happened, but the real test was about to start. Police were already gathered and ready to go after Thomas, but Evelyn knew that deep down, she would need to take the reins of the situation. She had lost so much time, and now, when her daughter was beginning to recover, she would not allow him to continue to go unpunished. Detective Roberts was in front, with his firm and determined gaze. The tracks had been enough to prove that Thomas was not just a possessive boyfriend. He was involved in something much darker. The connection between him and the cemetery, the traces found in the car, and the evidence of psychological and physical abuse were now at the center of the investigation. The plot that seemed to have a simple explanation was, in fact, hiding layers of manipulation and psychological control. "Evelyn, we need you to stay here with Lily. Let's get Thomas, and he will answer for everything he did," Roberts said, looking at Lily's mother with an expression of determination. But Evelyn knew she couldn't afford to be on the sidelines. She knew that the only way to really close this chapter in her life would be to confront Thomas. It was more than just a matter of justice. It was about recovering the peace she and her daughter deserved. And when she looked at Lily, Evelyn felt a renewed force within her, something she had never felt before. Their struggle was not just against Thomas. It was against the ghosts of the past that still haunted their minds. And she wouldn't allow those ghosts to win. "No, I go with you. I need to see with my own eyes that he will be arrested," Evelyn replied, his calm voice but full of an inner force that surprised even the detective. He knew that if she was willing to go to the end, the safest would be to accompany her. And so the small entourage left the hospital heading for Thomas's house. Evelyn and Lily were silent, but the tension between them was palpable. They were about to confront the man who had stolen the peace of their lives, who had manipulated and destroyed Lily's freedom, and who was now about to pay for what he did. Thomas's house was in a distant neighborhood on a dark, lifeless street. The feeling of discomfort was immediate. The sharp wind that blown that night seemed to carry a much more sinister omen than anyone could imagine. When the police car stopped in front of Thomas's house, Evelyn felt her heart shoot. Each step toward the door seemed to echo like a war drum, and she knew she was about to face something that would change her lives forever. Roberts knocked firmly on the door, and after a few seconds of tension, Thomas finally appeared. He was calm, perhaps even calmer than he should, as if he knew something was about to happen, but had already planned his escape. His gaze crossed with Evelyn's, and for a moment, the whole world seemed to stop. There was a void in Thomas's eyes, a coldness that made it clear that he was ready for anything to make sure his secrets were not revealed. "What do you want, Evelyn?" "I thought we had already finished," Thomas said with an arrogant smile, as if the woman before him were just an irrelevant piece in her game. But Evelyn was not intimidated. She stepped forward, keeping her eyes fixed on his. "You won't get away anymore. I know what you did, and you'll pay for everything," Evelyn said with a scary calm, her firm and unshakable voice. Roberts signaled the police, and without hesitation they entered the house, starting to search the scene. The tension grew. Evelyn could feel increasingly anger at his chest, not only for the manipulation of Thomas about his daughter, but for all the suffering he had caused. She wanted to see justice being done, but something in her heart also wanted a kind of silent revenge. She knew this battle would not just be overcome with prison or punishment. It was a battle for peace. Thomas, realizing that the situation was out of control, began to try to escape. But before he could react, the police surrounded him. He was arrested without resistance, but even then his arrogant look did not disappear. He seemed to believe that somehow he still controlled the situation. However, it was at this moment that Evelyn approached him, staring at him with an intensity that only one mother could have. "You don't control anything else, Thomas. I managed to get it out of you, and now, you'll pay." It was there, in that scene of tension and confrontation, that Evelyn finally understood that true strength was not in his search for revenge. Force was in his ability to fight for his daughter, to overcome fear and suffering to ensure that Lily had a chance to live without more shadows of the past. With handcuffed Thomas and being taken by the police, Evelyn looked at Lily, who was there, beside her, stronger than ever. Although the way ahead was still difficult, she knew that together mother and daughter could finally heal the wounds open throughout the past. And in a world where the impossible seemed to have come true, they were ready to write a new story. Thomas's arrest not only brought immediate relief to Evelyn and Lily, she was the first step to a cure that was yet to come. After the capture, the investigation deepened, and the police were able to gather all the evidence necessary to ensure that it was held responsible for its acts. Psychological manipulations, abuse, and attempt to control Lily's life were irrevocably exposed. However, for Evelyn and her daughter, the biggest challenge was to rebuild her lives after the nightmare they lived. The following days were a mixture of conflicting emotions. Evelyn felt at the same time exhausted and relieved, as if an invisible weight had been taken from his shoulders. But there was also the sadness of a difficult reality to accept: what Thomas had done with Lily, and what had destroyed in her life. She knew she couldn't erase what happened, but at least now she could look at her daughter and see the hope of a free future. Lily, in turn, felt a sense of liberation that she never imagined being possible. The process of emotional recovery was long, but she knew that after everything she has gone through, she could now begin to rebuild herself. With her mother's unconditional support, she began to find the pieces of herself that were fragmented. She was no longer alone, and it made all the difference. On a quiet night on the couch of his house, Evelyn and Lily sat together in silence, just enjoying each other's presence. Evelyn looked at her daughter with a soft smile, and Lily, although she still carried the weight of memories, returned the smile, a genuine smile than she imagined being possible. "Mom, thanks for not giving up on me, even when I didn't know who I was anymore," Lily said, her voice full of gratitude and sincerity. Evelyn hugged her, squeezing her against her chest, a heart full of love and a sense of victory, though it was a silent victory. A victory that was not justice in courts or revenge, but survival and overcoming. The bond between mother and daughter, who had been tested in unimaginable ways, was stronger than ever. "I will always be here, daughter. Always. Nothing, or anyone, will separate us again." Over time, physical and emotional scars began to heal. Evelyn and Lily went ahead, building new memories and leaving the past behind. Although the world around him was still full of challenges, they were better prepared to face them. They had lost themselves, but now, finally, they were meeting. Their story was not easy, but it was a story of overcoming. Evelyn learned that a mother's love can cross to the deepest darkness, and Lily found that even after she was broken, she could still rise. Together they were stronger than anything fate could throw upon them. Evelyn and Lily's story reminds us of the transforming power of human love and resilience. No matter how much adversity challenges us, there is always a way to get around and find healing. If you connected with this journey, share this story with others, and remember, overcoming begins when we support each other. If you or someone you know are going through difficulties, know that the strength to win is within you. Together we can create a world where love and hope prevail.